And we should be live, so I'll let Joe get started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our virtually connecting missed conversation about Digital Pedagogy Lab, which frequently we've been able to do these when we're actually all together at, well, when many of us were all together at Digital Pedagogy Lab. We didn't do that this year in part because of the online structure, and it's great that we have a chance to all be together here to kind of debrief a little and talk about what happened. We got a terrific set of folks who gave keynotes and led workshops and organized the whole thing and all kinds of good stuff. Let's do a round of introductions so people who know who we are. I'm Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon College. And I'm just gonna go from top to bottom on my screen, which would have us starting with Clarissa, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I can do that. My name is Clarissa Sorensen-Unruh, and I teach chemistry and statistics at Central New Mexico Community College. And there's George. Sorry, I had to shout out George. What was the last thing? Oh, I did the STEM. I think what do we call it? This critical digital pedagogy and STEM-H track. I hope that's right. You can find it on the page. Okay, I'm being quiet now.
Sean?
Hi, I'm Sean Michael Morris. I'm the director of Digital Pedagogy Lab. And yes, it was STEM-H and Critical Digital Pedagogy was the name of the course. So I was responsible for organizing the entire thing, setting up the architecture online and getting everybody involved. And I'm still tired, but it was a great experience.
Sarita?
Hi, my name's Sarita, and at DPL I gave a little keynote that was written, and it had a video with it as well. I teach out at UBC in the Faculty of Education. I'm assistant professor of teaching, and I teach about human development.
Welcome. Robert?
Not forget to unmute. I have never been to Digital Pedagogy Lab. I've sort of orbited around it and missed it many, many times. I teach it, but I'm a big fan of a lot of folks here. I follow your blogs, I read your Twitter feeds. And I teach French and interdisciplinary courses, and I'm trying to kind of drag my university in digital directions, and it's a bit of a haul. So that's my story.
Welcome, Robert. Autumn?
Hey guys, I'm Autumn Keynes. I am an instructional designer at the University of Michigan Dearborn. I attended the Digital Pedagogy Lab, and I was a participant in the Education Agency and Change track with Naomi De La Tour and Elena Rivera. And I led a workshop on ethical ed tech. And I think maybe that is everything, but it was a lot. It was like, I took time off work, and thank goodness, I know a lot of people weren't able to do that, but I was able to take, and I had all these bookmarks, and like it was awesome. There was so much stuff going on, but yeah, it was really great. And I will turn it back to Joe to go to the next person.
Kate? Thanks, Autumn.
Hi folks, I'm Kate Malloy. I'm a learning technologist in Celt at NUI Galway. I was a participant in George's digital scholarship track, but I still have homework to complete from that because I did not take time off work foolishly like Autumn did. And I delivered a workshop this year called Building Stories of Care Against a Discourse of Resilience with Claire Thompson from Ulster University. And Rissa, I made sure to memorize the title of it before I came on in case I got tongue-tied. So that's me. It was nice to attend virtually. I've attended in person in the past.
Sakina?
Hi everyone, I'm Sakina Walji. I was first time at DPL. I was lucky enough to be a fellow. And I'm currently acting Deputy Director at the Centre for Innovation, Learning and Teaching at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. And I manage a team of course designers, course production staff for online and blended learning. Thanks.
Welcome. Shakir.
G'day, folks. My name is Shakir Hussain. They call me a learning engineer out here at Northwestern's campus in Doha. One of the many, many terms that we all know that just mesh around everywhere. Been following Sean and Jesse's work quite a bit. I follow most of you on Twitter, so kind of been lurking around and just on the fringes of this tribe, and probably will interact more.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Audrey?
Hello, I'm Audrey Waters. I'm a writer. My website is called Hack Education. I gave a keynote this year, but like Clarissa, I actually have no idea what, and I don't even know what I talked about. I know I talked about my dog, and I guess maybe I tied it into education technology because I'm skilled that way. But it's good to see all of you.
Great. Great to see you. George?
Hi, everybody. I'm George Station. I am a lecturer at Cal State Monterey Bay. We are surrounded by fires and smoke and all of that, but I'm in a relatively good spot today and able to join you. Our classes start Monday morning, so I'm kind of in that mode as well. But I was a co-facilitator at DPL with Selena Lopez of the Digital Scholarship in a Time of Precarity. And hi, Kate. Hey, folks, who popped in and out during that week. And let's see, and I teach first-year seminar at Cal State Monterey Bay, so I see lots and lots of first-year students every semester. And I also do faculty development work with our Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment. And that's pretty much me right now.
Thanks, George. Lee?
Hi, I'm an instructor at SAIT in Calgary, Alberta. And I'm just kind of exploring the fringes of what you guys are all involved with, and I've never made it to digital pedagogy, so I wanted to see what I'd missed.
Great, that's wonderful. And Maha?
Yay, my turn. Hi, everyone. This is Maha Beli from the American University in Cairo here in Egypt, and I'm the co-founder of Virtually Connecting. And in Digital Pedagogy Lab this time around, I was in the Decolonizing Education track with Kevin Gannon. I was very lucky to have Sarita in my track. And then when I saw her keynote, like, yay, we have her in our track and we can talk to her more than everyone else can, but I thought everyone else might want to talk to her too. And so we thought this Digital Pedagogy Lab, this conversation, we could talk to her a little bit more about her keynote. And so Sarita, I know I've asked you this before, but can I ask you this again? Like, can you tell us a little bit of a background of what your keynote was inspired from? It was a for me, very emotional read. I enjoyed reading it, and then I enjoyed watching it and having both modes to listen to you.
You know, that seems like a deceptively easy question. And then when I think about what was behind it, it's not so easy to answer. The idea to write it came shortly after the elections in the US, and I noticed a lot more explicit hate speech happening, and I was really troubled by it and what was happening in the schools and how kids were picking it up. And I think when I talk about a beautiful prison, like, I love the place I live in, it's gorgeous, but sometimes we don't see what's there as well, right? So as the elections happened, you know, there were comments being spray painted on the streets and neighborhoods you would never really think would have that there. And they're just, you know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes from where I live. I live in a small community. So that's where it started. And the poetry comes usually when I'm really emotionally charged. That seems to be when it comes out and I write. And they were actually 2 separate pieces in the beginning. And then I was at DPL in Toronto last year. I was in the writing track with Sean and I shared it, and he suggested combining them. I wouldn't have thought about that. So I reworked some of the written pieces to go with the poetry, but it's really just watching the oppression happening around, the way it comes out. And I think sometimes the way we don't even realize how we play a role in it and how it affects us.
I don't know why I'm typing. I could actually react out loud. I was going to say I hate that it comes from, you know, sadness and anger and oppression, but I love that it comes out so beautifully because you're expressing, I think, the way a lot of people think and feel, and keynotes are often so much drier than that. And so that's, for me, it was sort of a transformative experience to see that keynote written in that way with that voice. So thank you for writing it. And thank you, Sean, for discovering it. Like, Rajiv was hiding her.
Well, Sarita actually sent it to me and was asking about where it might land. And when I read it, I immediately thought, at that point we were still doing DPL on. We thought we were going to do it on ground in Denver, and the first thing I thought was, hey, do you want to take over one morning and do this as sort of a mini keynote? So when we went online, I wanted to make sure that continued. That was still an opportunity.
Yeah, maybe if I can add something. I mean, really nice to meet you, Sarita. We met briefly on Twitter. I think it was also the timing of it. You know, you were billed on the agenda as having a keynote then, but it kind of suddenly popped up kind of in the middle of the week, and for me it was just a real jolt. Like, you know, suddenly we were kind of in this sort of, you know, academic space in many ways. I was like diligent. I was on Sean and Jesse's course, and I was trying to diligently work my way through, you know, in a very studenty way, trying to go through all the materials. And, you know, I'd taken time off work, and then suddenly it kind of popped up, and it just jolted me. And so I think it was also the moment, as well as many of these things are. And it just really made me reflect and think and take some time about, you know, all our own stories and where we've got to, and what we're not seeing, I think. And you know, sort of living in South Africa, it's, you know, deeply complex as much as I can say. I mean, I've been here for about sort of 15 years almost, and really you can only really scratch the surface of the deep layers of complexity and oppression and you know, how to even understand where people are and the diversity and the differences. So yeah, thank you for that. It was just a really wonderful moment as well during that week.
Thank you for sharing that. It's nice to know the different ways that it connects with others and the different experiences that are happening. Thank you.
So what other reflections do folks have about whether Sarita's keynote or Audrey's keynote or their track? I mean, doing it online was obviously not something that was originally planned, but I think you all pivoted to that. I just want to, you know, any of your reflections on anything? Like, for example, I just want to say, because I forgot to say in my intro, I went to Autumn's workshops. I was this crazy person who signed up for lots of workshops. But the one that I managed to engage with the most was Autumn's. Even I think I engaged with it better than my track, because it was slightly more structured than my track. And that was for me a big discovery for myself, because I generally like unstructured things. But because of the pandemic and the difficulty of managing time, I needed two things. I needed more structure and I needed more synchronous time. So I really enjoyed Audrey's Fireside Chat, for example, a lot more than I would. I mean, I would obviously enjoy to be with Audrey anywhere, but I thought I would enjoy the discussion forums a lot more than I did. And they have value, but in this time I needed the synchronous stuff and the organization of what Autumn was doing. So I wonder what it was like for others who are either facilitating these things. Sean must have gone crazy with all the logistics of, I don't know how many things were going on at the same time. It felt like 30 tracks because the workshops were so substantive.
As an attendee, that was also kind of my experience, Maha, that so I was in Sherry Spalitz's track on digital identity. which I completed about half of. And unfortunately, work boiled over because I wasn't actually in Colorado and they could get me. And that bummed me out, but I really did appreciate all of the effort that folks had gone to hold some of those synchronous events, to have like to have a differently rich kind of contact with one another. And I really thought that the idea, I really enjoyed having both live and written keynotes available. You know, that's that is something more people should be thinking about. That's an innovation that should get more widely spread. That was really useful.
I will second that, and I hope that that even is something that maybe even, you know, boils over once we have face-to-face conferences again. I think that was really helpful, being able to read it as well as, you know, have something that you can interact with. Yeah, that is definitely like something that was new, that was, I think, better than the face-to-face stuff, even though there were parts of it. The discussion boards were difficult for me to keep up with. I'm not that much of a discussion board person to begin with. I'm good at Twitter, but yeah, discussion boards for some reason or another, that's something that I struggle with. But it was really interesting, and I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to do it. I'm really glad that DPL wasn't canceled completely. I was really worried about that when everything started happening. I was like, oh man, they're just going to cancel it completely. And so it's a highlight of my year, you know what I mean? Like, and actually I wasn't able to go face to face last year, and like, so I did virtually connecting. So I did Twitter. So I did, you know, like I'm trying to like claw my way in virtually. So it was kind of nice that there were virtual options. I was really glad that it wasn't canceled. And I think there were parts that were even better than the face-to-face. And then there were parts that struggled because it wasn't face-to-face. So it'd be really interesting to see what DPL 2021 will look like when it will be truly hybrid, because we'll have all this experience from doing this stuff, and maybe we'll merge some things together, get the best of both worlds.
Sean may need to clone himself if we reach that stage.
That's in the plan, actually.
Good.
You're not supposed to say it out loud, Sean.
Really,
I was really hoping for some help from your part, Rissa,
yes.
like to deal with the cloning piece.
Well, it's slightly untested science still, so we didn't want to. You know.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was a lot of lessons learned. This was when we went online this year, it was like everything else that went online. You know, we were responding to a crisis, and so we did the best that we possibly could to bring the event on. And there was sort of a sense of, if Digital Pedagogy Lab can't do this, are we really even worth our salt? So we really had to be able to pull something off. And but like I said, there's a lot of lessons learned, and I think that next year and ongoingly we'll have an online component to the event, so that people can participate from afar in a full way, as opposed to just sort of seeing a keynote streaming or doing whatever. There will be a full courses available for people online from now on, essentially. But we're still figuring out like what that's going to look like and how that's going to relate to the on-ground piece, so that there's a sense of equity, but also a sense of difference in what people are getting. So, but yeah, we'll keep going, and we won't be using that same discussion forum ever again, because nobody liked it. I didn't like it either, but it was what we had. So.
I think I've got a couple of things. One is rethinking the keynotes. I think was vital, and it was kind of in the moment, but also in retrospect, it's like, oh, really glad this other stuff happened with keynotes, but also in the moment, it's like, wait a minute. Is Sarita getting equal time here because of the way the keynotes, Jesse's and Audrey's, were kind of laid out, and there was a certain flow for each? with the post, fireside chats and so on. And I was concerned about that, and so was my co-facilitator. And then it's like, okay, it's kind of working out because it's billed as a mini keynote. It's right there, it's written, and we're doing okay. But in retrospect, it's like everything had to be different and adapted to what was going on and still work within the week. And that made it okay. But in the moment, we were like, is it really okay? If I know what I mean with subtext and everything. So that was something I'm hoping that the keynotes continue to evolve, because I think they have to if we're going to keep doing this kind of a conference or institute. So I look at it as like something that it's an emerging format, right? It's not, quote, just a keynote. There's this other stuff going on that isn't the keynote itself. And that stuff that happened around it that wasn't the actual delivery of the keynote is maybe something we can latch onto and revisit and let it morph into something exciting next year as well. So that's probably the main thing. Let me stop and regroup, but that I wanted to say that about the keynote, and that's kind of riffing off of what Autumn had said earlier, and I'll come back with something else a little bit later.
I think one of the things I miss not being in person, which happens in person, it's quite difficult to do online, but it's having seeing people interact with each other who are keynotes together or workshop facilitators or track leaders together. It happened occasionally, but when it's in person, you see it a lot more, like in the hallways happening, that kind of thing, and then you get the opportunity to listen to them talk to each other and be there and participate in that. And so that's something that I think the having lots of workshops actually was something in person is very difficult to do, because you can't have as many workshops happening at the same time. You have just like, you can only do 2 workshops in the whole week, versus this one, you could jump in and out, and then it's not rude to leave the room. If you don't like what's going on, you just ignore that discussion forum, or you jump out of the Zoom call, they'll think you're disconnected or whatever. But I would have loved, but I also know it would have been really difficult to structure all that. So I'm just, wish list type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, oh, go ahead.
I want to say something about the keynotes, because I, having given a keynote, I also enjoyed the way it was done in some ways differently, although I always post a transcript of my keynotes online. That's something I've always done. So that part of it wasn't different. In fact, the thing I'm always super cautious about when I hear these calls for innovation is that you're asking more work of people, right? So not only did I prepare a written keynote the night before, but then show up the morning and give a different keynote, and then show up again to do a fireside chat. And I think it's one of the things we have to be really aware of when we, as we reorganize work and labor to accommodate digital gatherings, that we're asking people to do more. And granted, I didn't have to, I didn't get on a plane and fly to Denver. So my time was different in that kind of way. But I think we need to be mindful of what we ask of people, and what we ask of particularly. I feel differently about this community, but Jose is a friend of mine. Jose has no affinity and really connection with this community. So asking for him to do a bunch more work for the same keynote fee is just a different ask. So
I hear you on that. And it's very interesting, because also back to what George was saying, is this other work, it's more labor and it's more of your time, or is it more recognition of your work? And I remember when I did my OLC Innovate keynote this year, they had this system where, like, as soon as the time is up, and like people can't linger and they can't talk to you outside. And so I'm an extreme extrovert, and when I do a talk, I want to keep talking to people. And Shekhar knows this because I gave a talk with his institution. He stayed a little bit long. I want to connect with people. And so if nobody gives me the opportunity to do that, I feel like shortchanged, which is like the opposite. It's like, I want to do the work because I just want to connect with people. But with OLC Innovate, they actually had a session with Nate Angel and me and anyone coming in to ask questions, like a whole hour on another day. So that sort of was okay with me. But I hear you that it's also more work. So it's sort of trying to balance the, what it means to the person and what it means in terms of like the recognition of that scholarship as well. So, but you're right. If someone's not connected to the community, they may want to just jump in and out and not have to do more work.
Sean, were you going to say something at there?
I don't remember.
Okay.
And I actually have to take off, unfortunately. This is something that I want to say that it's something I'm very aware of, and I felt this way about the faculty as well, because asking people to teach online is a completely different level of labor than asking them to come to Denver, get a bunch of really cool food, stay up in a nice place, and then teach all day long, which is exhausting. But it comes with all these other things. Like, it comes with the community, and it comes with like sort of, you're in a different location and you get other kinds of treatment and you get other things in addition. Whereas here, you're just sitting here in your living room trying to do this with people who aren't actually present. And there's actually there's not as much feedback. You don't really get that sort of feedback from people. And so as I'm looking at 2021, and I'm looking at how to compensate for labor. That's a big part of what I'm looking at for next year, because if we're going to keep doing this online, I'm very aware of what it takes to teach online. So yeah, it's definitely something I'm looking at. But I do have to go. It's so good to see everybody, and keep your eyes open for what's coming next, because there is more coming next. So it's good to see everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for joining us, Sean.
I was gonna say when Sean, about your talking about what you were just saying, Audrey, about the keynote. I missed the emergence, right? Teaching a track, I scheduled the heck out of that track. Like, even in like extra days, it was really long, and I didn't know that everyone was done on Friday. Like, that wasn't made clear, so I did through Saturday. I was like, well, why not? And so some things that could have been bounded better. But also, like, folks were I remember talking with Sherry, and we were talking about it. She's like, well, I was thinking of not scheduling anything for like Thursday or Friday to allow for emergence. And I was like, I can't do that. I don't know why I can't do that, but I can't. If I was face-to-face, I could have totally done it. But I couldn't do it in that context.
Well, especially because not everyone took time off. So if they didn't know what was happening, they wouldn't schedule in time for your, I'm going to ask Sarita, because Sarita was in my track. Ours had nothing scheduled at the beginning, and then he tried to schedule, and I understand he had a lot of stuff going on, Kevin, trying to schedule synchronous calls with us after the thing started. And then I actually missed the announcement of when everything would be. And so I ended up like attending 2 half sessions. How did you feel about it?
I was similar. I like the structure, I realize. I was unsure kind of what was happening in the beginning. I like, so the aspects of face-to-face I missed, but I think maybe more structuring, and I like having this is what we're doing today in our agenda. So that works well for me, but yeah, at times it was hard to know where we were going and what was happening. But I recognize everybody has a different way as well. But yeah, and I think with some of the synchronous calls, sometimes I for some reason mix the times up, or I think one was added later, and so I felt really bad on Friday that I missed it, but I had scheduled something else. So yeah, it has its challenges, but and I think we learn so differently too.
Yeah, well, speaking of learning differently, because our track was decolonizing, and there were like maybe 5 people of color in the entire track, and then everyone else wasn't. And I realize we all need to decolonize and liberate ourselves, but the kinds of angles white people bring to a decolonizing conversation are often more academic. And so there was all this sharing of books and research. What am I going to read all this stuff? I want to talk about what I want to do in my class and how do we learn from each other's experiences. And there wasn't enough of that. And we were like sort of drowning in the sea of that.
Yes, I wish there was more, because that's really why I came, because I never feel I'm doing justice to the topic when I'm teaching. And so just learning, like, and really in taking apart that term, like, what does it mean? It means so many things to different people. And then how are we practicing it? So that's really what I was looking at. The resources were great. That's one thing I like about being online, is that you can at least save and bookmark them. When I get to read them is another question, but yeah, I really want to get into, so what does this look like when you're teaching?
Yeah, and how hard it is, because talking about it is easier, like critical pedagogy in general, right? All this stuff, you can say it. And people talk a lot about how it's a lot of people who are scholars in these kinds of things do not embody that practice.
So, oops, yeah, man. Can I jump back in? I had two things, but I'm going to do the second one first. So, I flipped the order because of what you were just talking about with decolonizing, or with that particular course. I was trying to figure out, and then I found out one of the people in my course, Heather Pleasance, was also trying to figure out, like, this feels like a certain kind of an online space going here. And we know, speaking of affinity groups, there are other Black people here. Are we going to do anything about that? Or are we just going to let it ride? Are we going to try to work the system? And so we had a fairly conscious and deliberate conversation about that in one of our synchronous sessions for the course. And I think Jim Luke was in there, and Selena somebody else was there. And so Heather and I went to the Black Academics workshop just to see who would show up and to engage in another environment, because neither of us was signed up for the Black Academics workshop. And I just thought, as a facilitator, I wasn't going to have time for workshops, so I didn't sign up for any anyway. And then I said, well, the heck with it. It's, going into Wednesday, let's just go. And the social experience in that workshop, there were two things going on. One is there was far more racial and ethnic diversity in there, I thought, in that particular workshop. And it wasn't, all Black or mostly Black or whatever, but there was just this range of, kaleidoscope of racial and ethnic diversity in that workshop. Plus the, I think additional, affinity factors, like, it was a little more open in discussion, I think, as far as LGBTQ issues and so on within the workshop itself. Plus, there was a great visual aspect, as well as the text-based aspect that there was a lot of in the other conversations. So the visual brought a lot to it as well. So we enjoyed the heck out of that. But then the other thing going on was, it's like, we could feel that, it's like, the workshop kind of feels like the course kind of feels like a workshop. What's going on here? There was overlap there, and that was okay, but it was noticeable, right? And so that was the other thing I wanted to bring up about just that particular workshop. And I think I want to put it out as a question: are other people, did other people notice anything about workshops in that sense? Were things was there kind of an overlap between those for you? And if not, why not? If so, I see some nods in the room here in this session when I said that, but were you feeling it at the time or not, I guess would be something I was wondering. And the other thing, real quick, is really for Kate and Joe, what you both said earlier, that I never felt at any in-person DPL like the three previous. You feel like your homework's not done. You both said that in your introductions today, and I thought, that's cool in one sense, that you're feeling connected to DPL still in that sense, but also, sense of obligation. That wasn't something I ever got on the way out of DPL. it was like, yeah, let's stay connected, let's keep working, let's keep doing whatever, but not a sense of my homework's not done, right? But since you both said it, I thought you might want to elaborate on that a little bit, or maybe avoid the topic altogether now. I don't know, but I was surprised to hear that. So 2 questions for the floor.
I guess I can elaborate on what I was talking about in the chat there. Yes, I said my workshop was a little OTT, over the top. I was running a workshop with Claire Thompson from Ulster, and though I'd been at DPL in person for 2 years, Claire never would have had the chance to go in person. And just to give it a tiny bit of context, it was a workshop we were going to deliver at OER 20, and we ended up doing that virtually when everything shut down instead of going to London. And we were really excited to collaborate on it together, because I'm in the Republic and she's in Northern Ireland, and we don't get to, you know, do a lot of stuff together just because of travel and everything. So I think just based on our personalities, when we were given the opportunity to run a workshop, because I'd done a workshop at DPL the year before, and you know, Wednesday afternoon, you know, you show up in Virginia with everything with you and you're kind of prepped, and you do it, and then you're still enjoying your track and you're enjoying your week because there's that bit of structure with it. But we just, I think we put the pressure on ourselves, which it was completely self-imposed. But I was kind of hoping this would come up while Sean was still here. So I did that, yeah, I could just say it was kind of our own making. But when we had that bit of freedom just in our nature, that we had a couple of synchronous sessions, we posted blog posts every day, we had, you know, different activities on Discourse, we had artifacts created, stories of care by the end of the week, and it felt like a track. But I can't, you know, it was completely self-motivated, and I think it was just the nature of the two of us doing it. So because I had been to DPL and been through tracks in person, and you know, had that time to really to work and to read and to do everything in that immersive space, that's where I knew I had just kind of dropped the ball with your track and Selena's track, George. That I felt like by halfway through the week, because we were running our own sessions, that you have that kind of nervous tension of we want it to go well, you know, and we wanted to see it through, and we wanted to, and it went really well. But then I felt like I had lost out a tiny bit, you know, on everything else. But I think for some of us that are just workaholics or worked through this and haven't taken a day off yet this year, because, you know, we've lost loved ones to the virus and we haven't been able to travel to funerals and had a lot of personal stuff going on. I think it was just, you know, some of us are good at keeping our heads down and just trying to go with it.
You used the word immersive, Kate, and I think that's what I missed out on, that DPL was a lot of stuff, and it was not a space I was successful at immersing myself in. And you know, that's and I really believe a lot of that's because I didn't physically move. I didn't even go up and do it from my office. I was trying to do it, you know, from my house with all of the regular life stuff, and also with all of the office stuff. And actually, I did have a colleague who put on, you know, one of my colleagues went and put on an autoresponder that said, "I'm at DPL this week," and that would have been smart, and that's why I hired her, because she's smarter than me. But you know, that there was a lot to do, but I did not immerse myself in doing it the way I think I would have in person, or could have arranged my day differently. And yes, George, kind of, it definitely became a feeling of I haven't finished my homework, which oddly in person I can handle, but like online, it becomes easier to just kind of shrink back and not maybe be as vulnerable with.
Yeah, I did the autoresponder, and like I said, I took time off of work. I was really intentional about the fact that like I'm doing DPL this week. And I was really lucky that I have a supervisor who was really supportive of that. You know, I made the case that like if I were doing this thing in Denver, I would put an autoresponder on even though I could still respond to emails from Denver. I really don't want to do that. I'm presenting as well as attending, and I really want to dedicate time to this. It was still a lot. It was still, and I guess that's the thing about DPL. Is always kind of feels like that to me. Like between my track and workshops and keynotes, like I always kind of just feel like, oh my God. But that's one of the things that I love about it, is that it is like this blast at the middle or the end of summer that's just like gets my brain going, and it's one of the things that I love about it. But yeah, I think that I was maybe, because time is so disrupted in the space, right? In an online space, at least in the physical environment, I leave my track and we do workshops, right? Like running the workshop, which was asynchronous with a couple of synchronous sessions, and then doing the workshop, which was asynchronous with a couple synchronous sessions. It just kind of felt like everything was happening at the same time. It wasn't that clear. So yes, in parallel.
Oh my God, that's the thing. It's the parallel processing that is difficult for computers to do. But we were humans in a pandemic. That's what it is. It's the parallel. It's that they were happening at the same time. If I had the workshop on one day and the track on 3 days, that would have helped. If they had a day for workshops, just workshops, you can do 5 workshops, but in sequence or something. You either take a full day or a half day. I think you got the thing that's been bothering me the most, because these things were happening in parallel, plus our lives were happening in parallel, and our children and whatever else. And then with Sukaina and me, the time zones. And I think that's the thing, that you had to switch mode of your thinking every hour to remember which thing was I doing. And with a pandemic and pandemic brain, I think it was just too much of a cognitive load. I think that's what it is. And then the scheduling was also difficult.
Part of it is like, yes, and I think part of it was also the technology pieces of it. So the I think like most of the folks I think knew what blogging was, but I'd never used that blogging platform before. I've done discussion boards, but I hadn't done that discussion board platform before. So some of it was also the getting used to these different technologies, how they interact with each other, how they connect to one another, how I'm supposed to use them, was happening at the same time.
Oh my God, this is how our students are going to feel in the fall. This is how our students were feeling. They had suddenly 5 courses by professors who had never taught online before, who were using different technologies, and they had no idea what they were doing. And all the deadlines were happening at the same time, and they had to switch. Oh wow, that was good. Like that, we experienced how the students felt overwhelmed last semester, and probably next semester.
Yep.
Well, now I have to rewrite what I'm saying to my faculty next Friday.
I have to rewrite everything I've ever.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, this is something that some of us, that I was reflecting with my colleague on, that this is what it's like, and especially what it's like, oddly, with your most engaged faculty who are reclaiming their own domain and picking their own tools because they're the tools that fit best, except now there's 5 of them. And yeah, honestly, I think that's probably it's a good experience for us to learn from. Maybe not a good experience for us to have, but a good experience for us to have had.
There is one asynchronous thing that was happening at DPL that Sukaina told me about that seems to have gone really well, which is the imitation game workshop.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. It was Shay Swager, I hope I pronounced that correctly. And I signed up, and it was, ed tech discourses, and I kind of assumed it was going to be a sort of, let's look at different terms and conditions and tools and analyze them. And in fact, it wasn't anything like that. It was a game where some of us were bots and the others were humans, and we basically had to trick each other for 3 days by lying on a Google Doc. I don't mean physically lying down, I mean actually telling lies about things. And then I just found it quite a release, because it was just so much fun. it was a kind of playful environment, but actually quite serious as well, if you really thought about it. So yeah, I was just sharing with Maha that it was in fact, I probably spent a bit more time on it devising strategies than I probably should have. But it also made me feel like it's really good to take people out of what they expect something to be. And also risky. I mean, I'm not sure, like we didn't quote finish the game because in the end nobody won and it was a bit of a stalemate, although I think Autumn might have won, sort of. But yeah, it was playful. And I think when you go somewhere physically, like a conference or a workshop, it's like human nature to start playing, right? Because you meet people and you joke and you develop this relationship beyond the content or the academic stuff or whatever it is, right? There's this sort of its own dynamics. And I felt that happened a little bit in the Imitation game because the format was just free and playful. So anyway, that I did enjoy. I mean, I can talk a little bit about my experience. I was on the critical digital pedagogy track, and I didn't realize, but it was the largest one, and there were over 100 people on it. So it was quite an interesting experience because after I sort of realized how many people were on it, and also with the time difference, I just made a decision myself that I would treat it as if it were like a connectivist MOOC. And kind of just do like my own thing and then not expect a full cohort and not expect to know everybody, because that just wasn't going to happen in 4 or 5 days, and just see what happened. And that's the way I kind of approached it, in a sort of fairly self-paced manner. And I think it worked for me, because that's a decision I made, but I'm not sure how other people in that track felt, because I didn't really develop any deep connections with people in that particular track. I mean a few maybe, but normally if I were to go to a conference or go to a workshop, I would come out with some sort of deeper, connection. So I think that was I don't know whether having that size of class online, I suppose we do, but there were no groups, like self-selecting groups either.
Yeah,
so
like we needed a small session like this one, right? Like
yeah,
it feels like...
No, we did have the synchronous sessions, and it was like, and they were great. Actually, I really enjoyed those. I could only join every other one because of the time difference, but yeah, there were like 30, 40 people.
And 30, 40 is a lot.
Yeah, but it was,
for me,
and it was flowing. Yeah, so there was no sense of intimate group for me in that.
Yeah, because when you said CMOOC, like I remember you said this to me even when this was happening. There's 3 things that I think it was a good realization, and I think it's a good mindset, because then if it's a CMOOC, there's no finishing and there's no missing out. So that's a good mindset. But you don't pay for a CMOOC, and the other thing is, in a CMOOC, you still get to sometimes develop intimate connections with a few people. But maybe because everyone else wasn't looking at it the same way you were looking at it. Like if everyone had the same approach to it, you might have made those connections, but because people were having different.
But also it was like 4 or 5 days, and we were trying to do other things. And I think what you just said around the parallel things just makes so much sense now. And if this kind of thing happens again, or if I'm ever myself involved in designing anything like this, I would really encourage people to just do like one thing, even, at a time.
Yeah, I almost wonder if they should cap, like I kind of feel like they should put caps on the workshop, or put caps on the tracks, so that they're small and intimate.
I can speak to that. I think that there were caps, but once it moved online and they thought that they could invite more people could participate, because that's the promise of the digital, right? Is that we can scale this puppy up
and make it cheaper, which they did.
So, but Sean and Jesse decided that it would be unfair to put that burden onto the track instructors. And so that's why that course was the one that all of those additional people were into. So if you think about the math, then that means DPL was about 150 people larger than it has ever been in the past too. And I think that also really changes your ability. You know, you go to a conference, and particularly an event like DPL that is pretty small, really 100 people, you do have a chance to say hi to almost everybody, and you have a chance to build very strong relationships with a handful. But once you go beyond that, you know, if you double in size, everything starts to fragment. And I think then taking it online is a different challenge. But I think that it's just, again, back to the sort of equity question around the labor that we expect people. You know, I think we'll see it in universities and schools now too. It's like, well, now that we can have now that you can honestly have 3,000 people in your chemistry class, or so, like, well, why wouldn't we? And so, yeah.
But with assessments, but this reminds me of something else, Audrey, and this is actually when I was doing my track in the US, it was just as Donald Trump had started doing the bans and all that kind of things that I was telling Sean and Jesse, it's kind of risky that I'm supposed to be coming in August, and what if they ban Egyptians, or what if I have problems with my visa, and why don't you pair me up with someone just in case, and I could still help virtually, but if I can't make it. And so they paired me up with Kate Bowles, which the fact that both of us were not from the US and coming from so far away means we were both really exhausted, but still we were two. And the distribution of that was kind of useful. And I think, and I also had a keynote in that year, so it was crazy. But I was co-keynoting again with Chris Gilliard. So I had shared both of these things. But I was thinking, if you do it online and you have participants from different time zones, what if every facilitator had a co-facilitator from a different time zone? So maybe one in the US and another one in the Euro-Africa time zone or the Australasia time zone, so that you have at least have that covered for both participants. And because someone was talking about a time zone cohorts, which is nice, but also what if, and someone was talking about how Sherry Spielitz was in Austria, right? And how that affected the dynamics of the track. But maybe rather than have 10 tracks, have 5 tracks with 2 co-facilitators. And then that way you're not adding to the labor of the facilitator. You're able to take more people, you're able to meet them on their time zones maybe a little bit. But of course, you don't know who's going to sign up for the track. So you don't know, one track might have one person from that time zone, another one will have, half of them. I'm not really sure. I'm just playing around here. I think everybody's learning with it. But thanks, Audrey, for bringing that perspective.
I think there were, as we're talking, I think there were 2 big problems that I can see from the facilitation side. One was that we actually did have more people on our track. A lot of us took more because I had a cap of, I think, 25 to begin with, and I raised it to like 40. So, I mean, I think we all, their thing was huge, but their track was huge, but also there was some kick in from other folks. It was more that, for me, it was that I had to give levels of participation, right? I felt like people were going to come in and where they came in, and they were going to do what they could do. And I didn't have them in a room, and they were paying attention to their other stuff. And I knew they were going to get distracted because online learning is like that.
And you didn't have 100% of them. I mean, each person wasn't there 100%.
Right. And no matter what you do, you can't be there 100%. Like, that's just not the way that works. And so I felt like a lot of the stuff that we could have done would have been burdensome if I had planned it for them. So I kind of was trying to be real sensitive to the amount of time that people could give. And I think that was maybe a mistake, but I'm not sure whether it was a mistake or not. It just felt like the right thing to do at the time. And then the other thing was that they really encouraged us to be asynchronous. Yeah. Really encouraged us to be asynchronous. So when all of us came in and we're like, we're going to do this synchronous piece, we could have done more fun stuff in the midst of synchronous if we had planned it that way without kind of throwing it at the end going, well, yeah, we're going to do this anyway, whether we should or not.
I want to say something about the synchronicity and the equity piece, which I've said before, and I think Sakina was in the room when I said it. It was the session with Kate Malloy, I think, that I was saying, we do talk about synchronous. Obviously, there's an access issue with synchronicity, but there are other equity issues by being asynchronous, because asynchronous assumes that someone has the bandwidth and the ability to concentrate and express themselves in writing, and that they have the time to read. And I'm in Egypt, and we're a very oral culture. It's really difficult to get people to read more than usual. Like, I know this is a common problem worldwide. It's more than usual over here. It's really difficult. And so people really struggle with this kind of thing. And if you're not used to managing your time and the information overload with asynchronous discussions, and I'm used to it and I struggled because of the pandemic type of brain freeze. So the synchronicity enables that socio-emotional connection for people who struggle to do it otherwise. And it feels like you don't want to, I'm glad people went ahead and did synchronous sessions. As long as they were optional, I think that helps. But obviously, when you know something's optional, you don't put something essential in it. And that's maybe the struggle that facilitators have. Autumn, by the way, has a beautiful blog post about the Zoom gaze that she just wrote yesterday. That is, wow. I'm gonna look for the link to that, and maybe Autumn wants to say something about it.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that was one that, I don't blog as much as I used to, and that was one that I had to, like, I couldn't sleep. Like, I was just like, I gotta get this out of me before I like go crazy. So I actually don't think it's my best writing. And it's basically just like an idea that's like gnawing at me. It started, I think, in a conversation that I was having with Meha about being seen and being visible in a Zoom session, right? And the equity around that. And we've been doing a lot of work. Well, I mean, virtually connecting, we've been doing that for a long time. But we've also got a new partnership with Equity Unbound and Virtually Connecting and this other organization called 1HE to try to crowdsource community building activities and things like that. And so we're thinking a lot about what it means to be on camera and what it means to be viewed and what it means to be viewed through technology. And so I was thinking about all of this, and I actually was having a conversation with Chris Gilliard, and I asked him because his username is Hypervisible, and I didn't even know what Hypervisible was till I met Chris Gilliard. I was like, what does that even mean? And I was like Googling it. And he's always teaching me stuff, right? And I was like, so what if I just want to what if I want to evaluate or look at like power and being seen, and invisibility as well, right? Like, so like invisibility and hypervisibility. And he said, well, you should look at media studies. There's some stuff with the gaze. And I was like, oh, wow, the gay community figured this out. He's like, no, not the gaze with a Z. So I did. And so, I mean, I'm very new to this idea, but yeah, I mean, there's just like all of this work that has been done thinking about what it means to be viewed, what it means to be looked at, from Foucault and like the panopticon to Hooks and race and gender with like Judith Butler. There's people who have done this work. And so I think there's some connections there. And I'm very, very, my thinking in this is very much in its infancy. Go check out the blog post. But I think there's real connections there. I think we need to think really, really strongly about what it means to ask our students to be viewed in these spaces, and what it means for the fact that some students can be viewed and other ones can't. So.
One of the things that I really liked, Autumn, was the way that I think you complicated that for me, that the combination of the issues around being looked at and the issues around being seen, if we put it that way. That's something that I found really rich in that writing, and it's worth everybody kind of sitting with for a little while. I really I don't know how well it meshes with the theory, and I don't think I care, because I think that I'm interested in the question that that the students may need to feel seen, as well as not feel observed or looked at, or however we want to phrase that. I thought that was really useful.
There's a lot there, and honestly, somebody said it sounded like, when they read the blog post, they said it sounds like a call for proposals, and it kind of is. It's kind of like me saying, like, my brain can't handle this. I need you guys to help me. So like, talk about this, think about this, because yeah, it's really big. It's a really big concept. When I first started, I just scratched the surface, and I was like, ah.
And today you uncovered parallel processing. You're coming up with a theory every day now. Like we might need to sort of put you in a textbook or something. Audrey had a really funny expression when I said this. Like I think maybe we were going to give her hack education, because that's kind of like your rate. That's the rate Audrey usually goes at. You know, one explosive idea a day.
That's true.
Okay, we've just crossed 5 minutes past the hour, and I don't want anyone to feel obligated to stay longer if they have to go. But I can stay for like maybe 10 more minutes.
I will need to bow out and hop back into another session. There's actually a 2-hour session locally, and I just took a big chunk out of the middle to be here with you all. So I need to go back for the closeout of that one. But
so glad you made
thanks
it.
for inviting and including, as usual. And so long to everybody else. And see you in a future session.
I actually thank you for saying that. I have to jump out and go to a wedding, actually.
Yikes. So that's better than mine. we can trade. Okay, see you guys later.
But I really do appreciate everybody coming together and giving me some of the experience that I was hoping to get during the actual event. And I feel like I've had some of it now. So thank you all so very much. I appreciate it.
I so miss these small sessions. Like it's the thing that I crave right now, because everything's online, but these small sessions with people you understand and who understand you, it's not just about being small, but also with people you know and you care about and you want to sort of, and you know you have a foundation to jump off. Oh,
yep. I got to. Bye, everybody. It's good to see all of you.
Audrey. Thank you for coming.
Love to all of you.
Hi, Ken.
I will. Bye.
Audrey. Bye.
Bye, Audrey.
And Teresa, I value so much the time that we got to spend with you here. And it was nice seeing Rajiv in the background. I like that. The man behind the woman kind of thing. He's gonna hate. I think he got upset for me in the beginning, but yeah.
I was like, that's awesome.
Coming back. My background's coming back.
He's coming
back. Your arm candy. Hello.
Hi, Rajiv.
Rajiv, are you upset with me? Because I'm saying feminist comments about you.
No. I had to make sure the children and the cats and everybody was doing okay. It's so good to see all of you. I was teaching in the background, and Sukhen, I was telling Sarita about that we had a lovely chance to chat and get to know each other's families a little bit as well before, so that was lovely.
Yeah, it was great. I do have to go. It's been a very long week. Really good to spend time with all of you. See you all soon.
Hi to Ahmad and Khalil.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Okay, I think I'm going to stop the recording and then hang out a little bit. What happened with the last